So as most of you know, and as most of you agree with me, we're all
Hey, how's it going, friends? Eric here, and I'd like to welcome you to a brand new video here on the Bioshock Hub. So, the last time I uploaded a video like this, which was a hour of cut and removed content, if you guys want to check out part 1, I'll leave it in the description down below, or I'll leave a card at the top right hand corner of the screen. You can just click on it, but I would recommend watching it after this video, just throwing that out there. Again, you guys seem to really enjoy it, and I wanted to bring you part 2. So, while I work on a bunch of projects in the background, I hope you're going to enjoy this video. So sit back, relax, and if you want to see more cut or removed content from the Bioshock series in the future, leave a like on the video or leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy the video by the end. Without any further delay, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy today's video.
Coming in at the number 10 slot in today's video is the Kashmir restaurant in Bioshock 1. You know, the one that actually started Rapture's Civil War, the one that got bombed. Yeah, that one. So if you guys missed the video that I did on the Civil War, there'll be a card in the top right hand corner of this screen or a link down in the description if you guys want to check it out. Anyways, the Kashmir restaurant. The restaurant had a block door leading to the Footlight Theater that was supposed to have a lot more bodies than the two seen in the game in front of the door, resembling everyone trying to get out at the same time and trampling each other during the attack on New Year's Eve. So, there's that. Also, the Atlas statue in the restaurant has a slightly different model than what can be seen within the game. And there were some screenshots as well. I'll leave those down in the description for you guys. So I really wish there would have been more to the Kashmir restaurant. I wish we could have seen the aftermath of the bombings, but however, we cannot. So that was number 10. So for the number 9 slot, I'm actually going to implement two different levels that were cut. And this is also from Bioshock 1. One of them being one of the more interesting ones in my opinion, and then something that was more of an amusement park. So, first off, we have the Rapture Zoo, and I've talked about this before a long time ago. The Rapture Zoo was an area that was intended to be included in Bioshock as a part of Fort Frolic. Multiple interviews with the developers of the game mentioned that this was a level and was cut ultimately far along within the design process due to time constraints, and they indicate that if it was one of the things that they regretted having to cut out. The only known piece of information about this level is that it would have featured an elephant. I think the zoo would have featured many more animals besides an elephant, but the fact that it even says that the developers actually regretted having to cut out this level kind of breaks my heart. I would have loved to just roam around Fort Frolic and actually see the Rapture Zoo. I'm not sure about you guys. And then the other one is the Ferris wheel. So also, a Ferris wheel was supposed to be included somewhere in the map, but much like the Rapture Zoo, the wheel was cut far into the process. Luckily, it was included in the DLC for Bioshock in the challenge rooms, where you have to rescue the little sister from the burning Ferris wheel. So, in the end, we got that in the game, but not in the actual base game. We got it in DLC, so there's that. And at the number 8 slot, we have an unused part of the medical pavilion, and this has to do with someone that I really enjoy in the game, that being Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum. If you guys want to check out a video that I did about Tenenbaum as well, there'll be a card at the top right hand corner of the screen for you guys to click on, or again, down in the description below. But I digress. Early promotional images of the medical pavilion show it being full of makeshift barricades and barbed wire, making it appear much more like a literal war zone. The pavilion's metro station was also originally located in a separate building and connected to the medical center via a glass tunnel. A Tenenbaum B PhD plaque is found in the game's files for the level, which was not used in the final version of the game. This indicates that Bridget Tenenbaum did have an office in the medical pavilion at one point during development, and the developers had thoughts of implementing that into the medical pavilion. So the credentials were there. She's a doctor. She would have had her own wing in the medical pavilion, but for some reason they decided to actually remove that and ultimately cut it from the game. I wish they would have gave Tenenbaum a little bit more in the game, but that's okay. She's the one that rescues the little sisters, or at least helps you rescue the little sisters, so it's fine by me. And at the number 7 slot is a level that you and I can probably both agree that this would have been awesome if it would have made the final cut in Bioshock 2. So we're going back to the Kashmir restaurant, except this time it's going to be the New Year's Eve riots. In the retail version of Bioshock 2, the introduction level is Adonis Luxury Resort, though it was the last to be created during the game's development. Also, it is named Prelude 2 in the game's files for a simple reason. Developers at 2K Marin had already created a Prelude level which was eventually scrapped. This level would have been the famous first level of Bioshock, or at least parts of it, Welcome to Rapture, but recreated as what it would look like during the 1958 New Year's Eve bombing at the Kashmir restaurant. This introduction would have been a playable flashback in which the player controlled Subject Delta, protecting Eleanor as a little sister inside the Kashmir restaurant when the bombs went off, and when the 1958 riots erupted. At the end of the flashback, Subject Delta would have woken up in the ruins of the flooded Kashmir restaurant 10 years after the events of the first Bioshock. The only parts of this unused level left in the Bioshock 2's files are that of the introduction cinematic of the game, which shows a slightly different version of the level, the loading screen images that would have been displayed during its loading, and radio messages. The two party goer models also have a bloodied and beaten up variant, which would have likely been seen during the attack on the Kashmir. And there will be screenshots provided down in the description under the source tab for you guys. So this would have been a badass thing to see. Just throwing that out there. I wish it would have been in the game. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. And at our number 6 slot is Fontaine Futuristics. If you guys are up to date with your lore and have knowledge of Fontaine Futuristics, you would know that, well, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but you know what happens to it. Anyways, in Bioshock 2, the Fontaine Futuristics level was to have been 90 to 100% out in the ocean, rather than inside a building. The player would have had to try to find a way to safely float down the ocean trench behind Fontaine Futuristics to reach Persephone. There was a balloon ride device idea where the player would ride the balloon to float to the bottom. An area in Fontaine Futuristics would have shown the players how Adam was extracted from the Little Sisters without killing them in the process. Not much is known about the concept, however, but it was described by the game developers as being quite brutal. So, thankfully, we didn't see how the Adam was extracted, and I'm completely okay with that. However, the idea of having to navigate down the ocean trench would have been a quite unique thing for Bioshock, considering the fact that Bioshock 2 was unique in its own right, actually having you go out on the ocean floor. So I think that would have worked, but showing how the Adam was extracted from the Little Sisters, not so much. You guys know how much the Little Sisters mean to me, but again, I digress. So in at my number 5 slot, I'm going to do a little pandering to my UK fans, because I don't show you guys enough love, and I do apologize. So this one is for you, and especially if you enjoy the Big Ben Tower. Originally, in Minerva's Den, there was going to be a Big Ben-like clock, so let's get into it. And it would have been titled the Big Ben of Rapture. A large clock was originally planned to be located at the top of Minerva's Den. The clock would have been illuminated from the inside, allowing it to be seen from all of Rapture. The gears located in the center of the structure would have been connected to the facility's computer system, aka the Thinker, and would have been explorable by the character, although the glass tower idea did not appear in the finished version of Minerva's Den. A large glass clock was incorporated into the boardroom of the den's executive wing. So again, for all my UK fans, here you go. This one's for you. I love you guys. Now, in at my number 4 slot is Ryan Amusements, and I'm going to preface this by saying it's a little confusing, because in early concept arts, the actual person who discovered Adam, or the slug connection of Adam apparently, was supposed to be a man, and not Tenenbaum. So, to me that's a little confusing as to why 2K Marin, primarily the ones who developed Bioshock 2, wanted to push that Adam was discovered by a male, not Tenenbaum, in their game. I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that they stuck with Bioshock 1's story in terms of the actual backstory, I should say. And I just don't quite get it. But again, whatever, I digress. It's just a little confusing. Anyways, let's get into it. So, the Hall of the Future wing of Ryan Amusements was meant to be more than just a showcase of plasmids. Concept art shows the wing also showcased Adam's origins, showing displays, harvesting methods, and dissections of the sea slug, along with the substance known as Adam, and again, along with a portrait of the person who discovered the slug connection, like I just mentioned at the beginning, which really confuses me, but whatever. The concept shows one final DeLorean in the Rapture Memorial Museum of a man in a diving suit, similar to that of the Big Daddies, in a heroic pose, with the words, "Welcome to Rapture," behind a miniature cityscape. The statue was designed to imply that Big Daddies were originally created to be the workers that built the city. The final DeLorean was ultimately replaced by the destroyed exhibit in the final game. And you can actually kind of see where Irrational took inspiration of this particular part. In Burial at Sea Episode 1, when Booker steps out of his office and you can actually look out and see some Big Daddy actually working on the outside of Rapture, there it is. So I'm glad that that was implemented into the game. Unfortunately though, I would have liked to see this level in Bioshock 2. I think it would have given it a little bit more depth in terms of just the overall surroundings, as well as just more depth to Ryan Amusements. And now we crack the top 3 of this list. All of these levels are going to be from Bioshock Infinite, and they were in either demos or in trailers of the game before it came out, obviously. So the fascinating thing about this is how different either the levels were in the final product of the game, whereas they were in the demos or trailers, or if they were just removed altogether. So the fact that you can showcase something off to the public, then when the finished product comes out, it's completely different. It just fascinates me. So, in at the number 3 slot, we have Emporia. Emporia in the E3 2011 demo was way different from the final version of the game. Originally mentioned in an IGN article, this location in particular would have been the 3rd level of the game. As with the final version, however, the Emporia district was vandalized by the Vox, as well as seeing citizens being tortured and executed along the way towards Comstock House. Aside from removed content, some scripted scenes and areas were altered and moved into other parts of the game. A store resembling Major's Notions, Sundries, and Novelties was moved into Battleship Bay and Soldier's Field, as well as its scripted Songbird scene moved to the final part of the Grand Central Depot instead. The scene with Elizabeth resurrecting a dying horse was removed, and the tear that led to an alternate 1983 was moved to Monument Tower. A similar scene featuring Daisy Fitzroy projecting herself in the demo was altered for Shantytown, only shown on the side of the First Lady instead of a red curtain on a building. Although the saved dentist that pulled the Vox teeth was removed, a similar scene is featured when arriving in Memorial Gardens before passing by the gate of Comstock House, where 2 Vox members are grave robbing a corpse for gold teeth fillings. The battle with the Vox security Zeppelin and its alarm was altered greatly and replaced with a similar version moved towards the factory in Finkton. So again, it's just interesting to see the initial E3 demo, which I would highly recommend that you check out, as to the final version of Bioshock Infinite that we got, how different levels can be just like that. So, pretty interesting. So as I previously mentioned in the number 3 slot, it's really interesting to see kind of the development process of a game. Whether you see certain levels end up in a game, get removed from a game, character development, etc. It's just always interesting to see that process, at least for myself. I'm not sure if you guys are interested in that. But this level almost didn't make it into Bioshock Infinite, and it's one of my personal favorites in the entire game. And that, at the number 2 slot, is Shantytown. So interestingly enough, Shantytown was cut not long after a VGA trailer of Bioshock Infinite, which showed the level off. The reason the level was cut was completely unknown, obviously only by the developers. What's even more mysterious is that after one particular developer left due to Shantytown not being included, it was finally included in the finalized game. So it took a developer leaving the studio for Irrational to actually realize that it was a good idea to put it in the game. Early iterations of Shantytown were headed by art director Nate Wells, and fun fact, he's the one that voices Jack in Bioshock 1, but that's another fact for another video. Anyways, drawing inspiration from the slums of Jamaica and Key West, and here's a direct quote from Nate Wells. All of the housing was wooden and colorful, as if painted by the residents to make the depressed quarters more livable. And each bright shack was stacked atop the next, climbing into the sky like an anthill, with the skyline piercing through it, end quote. However, creative director Ken Levine argued that it looked like the residents lived in garbage. It needed to be beautiful because Columbia was designed so that even the poor lived beautifully. Man, if only that were true. But, oh well. Originally, there were to be more beggars and dying people that were lying on the streets. Some of these beggars would actually grab Elizabeth and plead for money and food. Dead people could be found where Elizabeth would end up giving them flowers, putting them in peaceful positions. This is still seen in the main game in some portions of Emporia. So again, to me, it's just interesting to see how much a level can actually change, or altogether just be removed from a game, and then directly inserted back into the game. So, to me, Shantytown is one of the more interesting ones on this list. So now, in at the top of my list, my number 1 slot. It's probably one of the more interesting ones in my personal opinion as well, and I actually made a video on the character that was supposed to be in this level. And if you guys want to check that out, I'm referring to the Mad Toymaker. I did a video on I think 10 or 15 cut characters. I'll put a card at the top right of the corner of the screen that you guys can click on and go check out. If not, it'll be at the end of the video and you can click on the screen then, or I'll leave a link for you guys down in the description. So, in at the number 1 spot is the Mad Toymaker's shop. One level that was cut from Bioshock Infinite was the Mad Toymaker's shop. This level was possibly going to be in or near Emporia, and would have pitted Booker and Elizabeth against the madman who created automatronics for Columbia. Originally, the Mad Toymaker and his shop was going to be of some importance in the game given the amount of concept art that was created by Rob Waters for the Mad Toymaker's toys, but ultimately the style of the level was eventually cut and the entire idea was scrapped. I think this would have worked in Infinite just for the simple fact you had things like the Patriots and stuff like that, the rockets, etc., the turrets, the mosquitoes and stuff. So I really do think that this level could have had functionality within Infinite, and it would have added just a little bit more depth to the game, along with another boss. So really there weren't too many boss fights, in my opinion, in Infinite. So This would have just added a whole new one, and a unique one at that. Who knows? Maybe he could have thrown some different sort of machinery at you, or he could have had his entire level, or his shop in this case, booby trapped. So when Booker and Elizabeth are trying to get from point A to point B, they set off a trap. I don't know. There's a lot that they could have done with this, and it's just really unfortunate that it was ultimately cut. So that sucks. Now, very quickly before we get to the number 10 spot, if you guys missed the last video on the 10 removed levels from the Bioshock franchise, you can click the card at the top right hand corner of the screen, or wait till the video is over and it'll be at the end screen of the video. All you have to do is click on either one and it'll take you directly to that previous video. There's a lot of interesting and cool levels on that video, and I would highly recommend checking it out. Now, for number 10, we have Arcadia from Bioshock 1. So let's start it off, as I mentioned, with good old Arcadia. Now, players will notice a collapsed passageway at the end of the Arcadia Glens. This was originally another way to the Langford Research Laboratories, but it was changed for unknown reasons, more than likely either space on the game or due to the lack of budget. That's just my personal opinion. The park would have had two entrances in the farmer's market, the one at Tree Farm, which remained in-game, and another in the Rolling Hills, which would have led directly into the wine cellarry of Worley Winery. And if you guys know that location, it has one of my favorite Easter eggs within Bioshock, and that is the Pac-Man Easter egg. But again, I digress. Also, earlier versions of this level had Ryan killing the flora in Arcadia in stages as the player progressed to each new area, instead of just straight up killing all of the trees and plants at one time. So I think that would have added a little bit more of a dynamic feature to the game, seeing all the things die around you as you progress through the story. But I think they did a good job with just completely killing everything outright, and you having to actually fix that problem. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. In today's number 9 slot, I'm going to give you a 2-for-1. First, it's going to be the Footlight Theater, and then second, it's going to be the Farmer's Market, and just the changes that they made to both of those levels. So the Footlight Theater was not originally a theater at all, but merely the burnt out shell of a building. Since the game developers, irrational, had so many assets from the Fort Frolic level left, it was decided that they would change the room into a small theater space to give the Big Daddy and Little Sister a literal theatrical introduction, which, in my opinion, was very well done. This was the place where the player would originally get the revolver from the thuggish splicer attacked by the Big Daddy, but it was removed and moved to the Kashmir Restaurant's entrance so the player would get the gun much earlier on in their playthrough. Next up is the Farmer's Market. The Farmer's Market was first built twice as large as its final version in Bioshock 1, with two symmetrical halves and long corridors for the various stalls. The level ultimately had to be cut in half for navigational and production reasons, and the market's corridors were separated using doorways. The Rapture Metro station found in Arcadia was first placed in the southeast corner of the Farmer's Market, where a gene bank can now be found. It was moved to the Rolling Hills when the developers decided a trek back after healing the forest was boring, redundant, and quite frankly, unneeded, and I agree with them on that. The hanging corpses found in the crawl space in one of the fruit stalls in the main market were leftover ideas from a serial killer loose in Rapture during the fall. So that kind of piques my interest. I'm not sure what it is about a serial killer being let loose during the Rapture Civil War that interests me, but I think it would be kind of a cool idea. You have all of these splicers, you have all of the regular people that are trying to hide from the splicers, and then you have just this random serial killer that you could potentially come across during the game, adding another boss or another type of enemy. So I think that one would have been a cool addition. Again, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. So next up, for the number 8 spot, we're going to be moving over to Bioshock 2, and we're going to be talking about Pauper's Drop. Pauper's Drop was going to feature a garbage dump. There was also an idea for a guy who would be vending batteries and fresh drinking water at the drop. Some of these items can still be seen in the stalls of the Skid Row Marketplace. There was also scripted rooms dubbed the Dream Rooms, where the player would experience ghostly memories or flashbacks before the idea was cut. So ultimately, like the ghosts in Bioshock 1 that you see, and the ghosts in the Bioshock 2 trailer. Pauper's Drop would have also featured dead Big Daddies placed in various locations as a way to show Grace Holloway's hatred towards all protectors following Eleanor's abduction. The Big Daddies are an essential part of Sophia Lamb's atom gathering plan, obviously, and the player still has to gather in Pauper's Drop. So in the final game, Grace's vendetta is focused squarely and solely on Subject Delta. The Sinclair Deluxe, which we will be talking about soon, had 2 dead Big Daddies lynched and strung up from the upper floor balconies in the atrium. The district's Atlantic Express train station had a corpse hanging above a bonfire and labeled Baby Snatcher, which is a nickname Grace gives to Subject Delta all throughout the playthrough until you finally meet her. One was by a collapsed tunnel near the Fishbowl Diner with a sign reading "Your kind ain't welcome" placed next to it. The final one is still present in the game, however, the sign is missing, so the scene looks like the result of an accidental cave-in. The hanging Big Daddies in the Sinclair Deluxe can still be seen in one of the loading screen images at the start of the level of Pauper's Drop. So there's a lot to take in there, but I still think the addition of seeing all of these Big Daddies scattered would have been pretty cool. So for the number 7 slot, I'm actually going to give you guys another 2 for 1, and that's for one simple fact. Every time I upload a cut content video on my channel, you guys seem to absolutely love it. I love just reading your comments, I love responding to your comments, I love seeing your suggestions. I just love the support, and you guys have been supporting me for so long now. This is a small way for me to give back to you guys, just to give you more content. And don't worry, a lot more content is in the works, so stay tuned for that. But in at the number 7 spot, we're going to be talking about both the Sinclair Deluxe and Siren Alley. So let's start off with the Sinclair Deluxe. The Hanging Big Daddy was replaced late in the development process with blue morpho butterflies fluttering around butterfly feeders. There were at least 2 versions of the atrium with different assets in the center by the elevator in place of the sandbags that are present in the current game. One version had a round bench, which can still be seen in the above mentioned loading screen images, and they'll be sourced in the description below under the source tab, so you guys can check them out for yourself, and that is at the start of the Pauper's Drop level. Another iteration had a deluxe playground, consisting of an impromptu slide and jungle gym play area set up for a young Eleanor beneath the hanged corpse. Again, you guys can see the screenshots. Just go down in the description where it says sources and find the one for the Bioshock 2 removed content if you guys are interested in checking those out. Next up, we have Siren Alley. So Siren Alley and Pauper's Drop were originally meant to be combined in one level. They would have been one large slum, containing elements like a diner, a church, a brothel, etc. One of the main ideas for this level was that it would have been a film noir style and atmosphere. Eventually, the designers decided that there were too many important elements for one level, so obviously it was then split into 2, the slum being Pauper's Drop and the red light district being Siren Alley. So can you imagine this huge space of Pauper's Drop and Siren Alley combined together? That would be a lot of exploration in game, and you guys know from watching live streams I love exploring, so that would have been cool for me, but with them splitting the 2 into 2 different levels, I think that was for the best. For the number 6 slot, we're going to be talking about one of my top 3 levels within the entirety of the Bioshock series, and that is Dionysus Park. Dionysus Park was first designed as a totally preserved, uncorrupted section of Rapture, untouched by the Civil War. Development was far along before they decided to actually pull the plug and change it to be previously flooded. Removed radio messages revealed that the park was owned by Ava Tate, and that was a character I covered, I believe, and one of the cut characters videos that I've done in the past. She used this space to entertain her followers with extravagant Adam, now called Eden, fueled parties. An early idea was for a doorway out of the art gallery space, which led to an indoor forest. This was an experiment with spatial surrealism that ultimately failed. Dionysus Park was also in one point to be flooded in-game, and the entrance was to be through the atrium of Fort Frolic, which would have been awesome. But ultimately, it was just completely flooded since the events of the original Bioshock. Concept art also exists for a preserved Triton cinema, which would have been showing MGM's The Wizard of Oz at the time of Delta's arrival. There were also ideas about film studios in Dionysus that never made it into the final cut. Stanley Poole would have used the cinema as a hideout and shown Delta film reels of his past life as Johnny Topside. I think from a lore standpoint, that last line would have been amazing just to actually see who Johnny Topside was and who Subject Delta was as a person, but that will remain a mystery for the rest of this series, so it's a bit unfortunate, but it's okay. Oh hey, look, and at number 5, you guys get yet another 2-for-1. I'm feeling really generous today, even though it's the same level. It's Persephone, but there's 2 different versions of it, so keep that in mind. Persephone, at the time dubbed Eden, was meant to look beautiful and maintained. The idea was that once Sophia Lamb took over the facility, she wanted to make her own utopia and wanted everything to be communal. Originally, the structure was meant to have more Art Deco elements to it. The drapery envisioned in this previous concept of the level was later reformatted for the Little Sister's vision. A picture in the Deco Devolution, The Art of Bioshock 2, shows the cafeteria, which was at one point part of the Little Sister's vision as well. Now, let's talk about Inner Persephone, because it also incorporates a part of cut content in terms of characters. So, Little Brother therapy rooms were going to be an Inner Persephone, but the idea of the Little Brothers were cut from the game altogether. The therapy rooms are seen in the games, and they're for the Little Sisters. So again, I still wish there was a thing as a Little Brother. I think that would have added a little bit more to the game, but ultimately I'm completely okay that they just stuck with the Little Sisters. So let me know what you guys think. And at the number 4 slot is kind of a character that I've talked about in a previous cut content video, but it was ultimately meant to be a level and a cutscene as well, that being the Deep Sea Explorer. Another cut idea was for a deep sea explorer or diver to be sunk down in a bathysphere connected to a boat, more specifically the USS Janney in 1957. While being sunk to the bottom, the sphere suffers some technological issues thanks to the water's pressure. While at the bottom, the diver exits the sphere and starts to walk on the seabed, connected with an air tube to the sphere. When walking, he witnesses a light and is shocked to see the underwater city of Rapture. While watching the city, several torpedoes are launched at the USS Janney. The diver is dragged towards the sphere when the captain of the boat starts to reel it back up. The diver loses control of himself and ends up pulling off the tube and sinking down, with the bathysphere falling after him. The scene ends with the reflection of the diver's eye being seen on a broken piece of glass. This idea might have been how the man who became Subject Delta found Rapture, but it's completely undetermined, and it's kind of an idea that was just thrown up into the air. So I think that would have been a cool cutscene. However, in the context of the game, I'm not quite sure how well that would have worked out. For the number 3 slot, it's only fitting we go to the 3rd game in the series, that being Bioshock Infinite, and that is the dental office from the E3 2011 demo. The Bioshock Infinite E3 2011 gameplay demo, promotional screenshots and concept art shows the dental office of Dr. White, which is kind of ironic, but anyways, which was intended to appear in this level, but was ultimately removed. The business advertised cleanliness and a painless experience. The demo showed a scene where the dentist would be thrown out through a window of the business and then further harassed by Vox Populi. So, it's unneeded, I know, and I definitely don't think it should have been in the game, just because it probably would have been a quick 15 to 20 second little interaction. So again, ultimately, I think it was for the best that it was ultimately cut from the game. It had no place in it. It didn't further the storyline. There was no character development. So it was just a little unnecessary, to say the least. So for the number 2 slot, I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit. It still has to do with cut levels, however, it's more of the difficulty that would change the levels overall. And I'm referring to cut 1999 mode mechanics. When 1999 mode was announced, it was originally stated that the player would have to make choices at the beginning of the game, and that said choices would carry throughout the rest of the game. Game files show that the player would have to choose a class, and this class couldn't be changed at all. If you chose the wrong class, you were pretty much screwed and you were stuck with it. These classes would likely limit the gear the player could use, and it's possible that the weapon selection could be affected as well. The classes that could have been chosen from were Melee, Mobility, Soldier, Tank, and Vigor. Game files also indicate that an experience system was to be used with a message saying, "Congratulations, you've leveled up," obviously every time you've leveled up, so there would have been some sort of XP system. Ken Levine is quoted as saying, "This mode is not going to feel like Bioshock. The descriptions make 1999 mode sound similar to that of the System Shock series, which the Bioshock series is a spiritual successor of. There was never an explanation given on why some of the aspects of the overall 1999 mode were removed. I feel that a leveling system would have been good. However, picking the class and kind of getting stuck with that all throughout really would have limited what you could do during your playthrough, along with the increased difficulty. Obviously, there would have been more replayability, since I believe you had 5 or 6 different classes, as I mentioned, but ultimately it would have been the same game, you just choose the different class. So I'm okay with them taking that out completely, and who knows how that would have actually affected the levels. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think would happen if those implementations were actually in the game? How much more difficult would 1999 mode be, and how much more difficult would the levels overall be? Like Lady Comstock, the final boss at the end of the game where you have to fight off the Vox and everything else. Let me know. I'm really interested in knowing your guys' responses. And now we're down to our number 1 spot of the video. This is ultimately a level and partly a glitch. If you guys have managed to successfully do the glitch by the time I finish reading the description, please let me know on Twitter by sending me the video if you can record it, or let me know down in the comments. But anyways, we have the Sea of Doors. The endgame, which takes place at the Sea of Doors, a place containing and connecting all realities, was to feature more lighthouses, a representation of all the doors to other realities other than Rapture's and Columbia's. Those places included an Arctic lighthouse, a desert lighthouse, and a space lighthouse, where an observatory, an Arabic-looking tower, and a space station looking very similar to Citadel Station from System Shock would appear. If one manages to access the space lighthouse in the game and approaches it, they will find a small entrance containing a Colombian citizen model. Only untextured models can be found within the game's files, though the observatory can still be found outside the playable area of the Sea of Doors on some snowy mountains with a stone staircase and a wooden bridge between the peaks. These buildings and their doors can be opened as a scripted event, and doing so will start playing snowstorm effects and falling through the map. So that's where the glitch comes in. Personally, I wish I could do this and record this and upload it for you guys, but I don't know how to do this. I don't know which way to go. I don't know which lighthouse to actually go to. That's why I'm asking for your guys' help. If you've managed to find one of these 3 different lighthouses, please let me know. If you have a video, send it to me on Twitter. The link will be in the description. Or if you've done it, let me know down in the comment section below, because I'm very, very interested in seeing what is actually in these lighthouses besides what I just read to you. And if you want to see screenshots of these, again, go down into the description under the sources tab and it'll be there for you. Coming in at the number 5 slot is a character from the classic Bioshock 1, and his name is Stitchy. If you guys remember the Museum of Cut Content video that I did, he was there. If not, here he is in all of his glory. The first splicer that Irrational created for Bioshock, Stitchy, was used in many early concept demos and was fully functional in-game with kinematics, hit reaction, and voiceover. It took us that long to realize he wasn't a good model, said lead artist Sean Robertson. In quotes, "This is probably the worst abortion that Irrational Studios has ever made." So the fact that they called their very first splicer model an abortion is absolutely hilarious to me. So, Stitchy, I'm sorry, but you have to come in at the number 5 slot in today's video. Coming in at number 4 in today's video are the Aqua Splicers of Bioshock 2. Several pages of concept art in the Deco Devolution art book are dedicated to a splicer that could breathe underwater, named the Aqua Splicer. One designer notes, there were 2 forms to him. When you're inside Rapture, it would be more upright and have a more humanoid look to it. When it would go out in the water, what looked like its arms when it was on land became its legs, more or less, and its fins, and that would propel it forward. Those splicers would have a special air sac with leeches attached. The final model for the splicers utilized the same silhouette as the crawler, suggesting that these characters would have been a modified version of the crawler's model in order to save assets. In the final game, the only enemies that can survive out in the sea are Big Sisters and Big Daddies. Can you imagine a fish-like splicer terrorizing you in Rapture both inside and outside in the ocean? To me, that would be absolutely terrifying, so I'm definitely glad that these didn't make the cut in Bioshock 2, although it is a very good idea. Let me know what you guys think of those down in the comment section below. In at the number 3 slot is the character that you see on the thumbnail of today's video, and this comes from Bioshock Infinite. They were called Freaks. The so-called Freaks were enemies conceived extremely early in the development of Bioshock Infinite. The Freaks were people who were infected or mutated in some way, shape, or form with a compulsion to eat corpses. Upon consuming a dead body, the Freak will become monstrous, growing in size and ferocity. One Freak was a girl named Shelly, and that's who you see on the thumbnail. When transformed, she is a 9-foot-tall monster with claws and arms so long that they nearly reached the ground. The concept art for the Freaks show that there were many imprisoned or restrained in some way to try to keep them from eating the dead and possibly the living. Shelly is portrayed as having a cage around her head, and another Freak wears a straitjacket. When the basic themes for Bioshock Infinite were established, the concepts of Freaks were dropped immediately. And that is for good reason. These, I think, wouldn't have had a place in Bioshock Infinite, and I personally am glad that they didn't see the light of day because I feel like they would actually be an abomination to the game. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Dropping in at the number 2 slot is yet another enemy from Bioshock Infinite, and these enemies were called Merged. The Merged are a removed concept from Bioshock Infinite. Some citizens of Columbia would appear severely deformed after being exposed to tears. The concept of the Merged deals with Infinite's themes of alternate universes and quantum physics, similar to the way Bioshock's splicers are used to examine the dark side of advanced genetics and drug abuse. So, as you can see by the example on screen now, an older gentleman would see and encounter a younger version of himself, thus causing the two to merge together. Again, I'm glad that this didn't make the cut because I think this would be absolutely terrifying. Can you imagine either Booker, Elizabeth, Daisy, Jeremiah Fink, or any of them having 3 or 4 faces on their head, 4 or 5 arms, or anything like that. To me, that would just be absolutely repulsive to look at. So again, I'm definitely 100% glad that this concept was dropped from the game. Now, before we get into the number 1 spot, and this one is my personal favorite, so you're in for a treat, I want to test you guys. You guys really seem to enjoy the cut content or the removed content videos that I post here. So I challenge you guys to get this video to either 150 to 200 likes. If you guys can do that, I'll do a special episode on 10 to 15 removed characters or concepts from the Bioshock franchise. If we have a deal, let me know down in the comment section below, or drop a like on the video. I would greatly appreciate that. Finally, coming in at the number 1 spot is my favorite on this list for a very good reason. And again, it comes from Bioshock Infinite. And these are the Vigor Junkies. According to the art of Bioshock Infinite, Vigor Junkies were planned to be one of the types of enemies encountered in Bioshock Infinite. As Columbia's version of the Splicers from Rapture, they suffer psychological deterioration as a result of excessive vigor use and addiction. However, the Rapture comparison limited the use of Vigor Junkies in the game, and an in-game explanation by citizens dialogue in the Columbia's Fair mentions that average citizens were not that interested in obtaining vigor abilities due to the formula's kinks that Fink needed to work out. Small aspects of the Vigor Junkies are still present in 3 of the characters: the Zealot from the First Lady, Cornelius Slate, and one of Slate's soldiers with the same abilities as a crow. 3 of the characters' madness have been exacerbated by their repeated use of a particular vigor, such as Murder of Crows and Shock Jockey respectively, and the latter even has a small Shock Jockey crystal protruding out of his head. Although the fireman's appearance did not appear in the Vigor Junkie concepts, a Vigor Junkie character in a top hat, glasses, and a black coat shows many of the same Devil's Kiss abilities as a fireman. The Vigor Junkie is reimagined as the Frosty Splicer in Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea. They have large crystalline forms growing out of them, unlike most other early splicers, which at this point are only just beginning to show signs of mutation from vigor exposure.
So coming in at the number 10 spot on today's list is the Slugbug Big Daddy from Bioshock 1. A 4th type of Big Daddy called the Slugbug started to be developed but never got past the concept art stage. And if you guys go back and watch the videos, you'll notice a lot of the concept never got actually approved, and a lot of it was scrapped at the concept art stage. This Big Daddy type would have a large slug-like creature riding on its head and shoulders of their Big Daddy suit respectively. Several of the slug's tentacles would be rammed into the viewports of the suit. Other smaller tentacles produced arcs of electricity and could fire bolts of plasma at its enemies. It was first envisioned that the player would have to kill the slug in order to defeat the Big Daddy, but the concept was deemed unworkable. Now this sounds like a very badass premise to an enemy, however, like it says, I don't see the practicality of it in general, and I'm not quite sure if it would have actually fit the theme of Rapture and Bioshock 1 itself. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below of that. Coming in at the number 9 slot is the original Subject Delta. At the point of the Hunting the Big Sister trailer after its release, the player did not yet have their own character model. As such, the video shows the placeholder of a Rosie model to represent the player instead. Delta's design went through many iterations of size, helmet, equipment, color, and even as simple as his faceplate. One iteration of his design looked like a slight variant of the Bouncer Big Daddy. An idea for the player's aperture, the glove openings, was that he would have a parasite protruding from his forearm. Instead of actually experimenting humans to make the early Big Daddies, they would use the parasites to test plasmids. The iris would open, and the parasite would fire the plasmids. Concept art also reveals that the team went through many concepts while entering the Little Sister's eyes. From seeing him as an all-American father figure, to a superhero, to a gold knight in shining armor. The only one that ended up making it in the final cut was the gold knight in shining armor, and that is if you do all the good options within Bioshock 2. That being sparing Grace Holloway, sparing Stanley Poole, and basically saving Gil Alexander by putting him out of his misery. And speaking of Stanley Poole, that deceitful little shit, coming in at our number 8 slot, we have the original Stanley Poole. Stanley had another character model with a period-appropriate Hawaiian shirt. The producer stated that it was too out of place for the setting, and it felt too modern. Unused radio correspondence from Dionysus Park revealed that Stanley's personality and role were quite different from what's portrayed in the game's final product. Initially, he enlists Subject Delta into getting photographic proof or evidence of Ava Tate's illicit activities. The dialogue paints him as a stuttering, prudish campaigner for truth, moral decency, and also views splicers as deplorable moral degenerates. Man, have times changed. There were also many hints that he and Grace Holloway were actually married, suggesting that the Stanley and the deep blue Revo poster mentioned above really is him, and that they raised Eleanor together when Sophia was arrested. Obviously, we know that's not the case. He likely would have cared deeply for the young girl. Despite having to give up their roles as a duet group for the Limbo Room, Stanley appeared happy, though would often sneak out and return looking sick. According to Grace Holloway's unused audio diaries, Stanley would have been a, quote, bad boy with an attitude at one point. Left Grace sometime after Eleanor's disappearance, which any normal man would. I'm completely kidding, that is disgusting. He believes that he never engaged in splicing, though the evidence shows that he did heavily. He appears to be suffering from amnesia or some sort of schizophrenia, possibly as a result of his splicing. So man, all of this information, they could have used it to actually make Stanley Poole a decent and interesting character. Wow! It's like they could have done something completely worthwhile, whereas the other Stanley Poole is a little bitch. Who knew? So in at our number 7, 6, and 5 slots, we're going to be looking at some minor characters that were removed from Bioshock 2. Unfortunately, there isn't too much information about these characters, but there are information and unused lines nonetheless. So in at the number 7 slot, we have Agnes Kirschenbaum. Agnes Kirschenbaum would have been a citizen of Rapture. She assisted her friend Lucinda in protecting herself from a guy named Chad, who was harassing her. Typical Chads, am I right? She bought her electrical storm, so if Chad were to harass Lucinda again, he would have received a hefty jolt of electricity. And if you don't know what electrical storm is, it's a gene tonic, so there you go. She is one of the characters who was ultimately cut during the development of Bioshock 2. And I do understand why. There really was no significance behind her role. So, with that being said, here is the unused audio diary. And at our number 6 slot, we have Douglas McDougal. What a name. Anyways, Douglas McDougal would have also been a citizen of Rapture. During the Rapture Civil War, he managed to take refuge in the Triton Cinema with supplies he had gathered, narrowly avoiding being shot down by security bots. He, again, is one character who was cut during the development of Bioshock 2. Now, here's something that really interests me, and I think it might be a good idea. I would have loved to have seen other people, besides splicers or the main characters in Rapture, actually be involved with the story. Trying to hide, trying to survive. I think that would have added a little bit more of a depth to the actual environment itself. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. And again, here is the audio diary for you guys to read and check out for yourself. Now for our number 5 slot, we have another citizen of Rapture that was cut during Bioshock 2. that being Leonid Berman. And I'm going to say this one more time. All of the citizens that were removed, whether it's Bioshock 1, 2, or Infinite, in my opinion, should have stayed in the game. I think it would have added an awesome element just to have more people involved, especially ones that are trying to hoard up supplies and survive as best as they possibly could. So, again, please let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Leonid Berman was a citizen of Rapture who ended up living in Pauper's Drop. He mentions in his audio diary that he heard about Eddie making a score in Neptune's bounty. He eventually planned on paying Eddie a visit to show him that he shouldn't hoard all of the goodies to himself. As I mentioned, Berman was one of the characters who was cut during the development of Bioshock 2, and I'll also put the audio diary up on the screen right now. For our number 4 slot, we have everybody's favorite multi-dimensional father, that being the original Booker DeWitt. And all trailers that I'll be mentioning within this section will be provided in the description if you want to watch them for yourself. The early version of Booker's arms were seen covered by sleeves from a pinstriped coat or potentially suit. This version remained in most of the early gameplay footage, even after the artwork debut of his appearance on the EGM cover, which had him appearing with rolled up sleeves. It wasn't until the Beast of America trailer that Booker was finally given rolled sleeves to match his artwork appearance, along with his traditional AD handbrand. Before he was actually voiced by Troy Baker, Booker was voiced by Steven Russell in the first demo trailer. The Beast of America trailer at one point also shows Booker wearing a ring with a devil's face, similar to the icon of the Devil's Kiss Vigor. A model of Booker's left arm with a V, most likely for Vox Populi, was tattooed on his wrist and can be found in the game files, but it was never used. I'll put the pictures up on screen for you guys to check out. They are pretty badass, and I think it would have added a unique element, especially with the whole multiverse theory and jumping from tear to tear. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. In at our number 3 spot, we have an early and unnamed prototype enemy, and this has to do with the Gibson Girl trailer, which I'll provide in the description for you guys, or the Gibson Girl video. Appearing in the same video as the prototype Gibson Girl Elizabeth, there is an unnamed enemy shown resembling a giant mechanical doll in appearance. In my personal opinion, I believe if he were still in the game, this would have been made by the Mad Toy Maker, yet another cut character from Bioshock Infinite. No information has been given on what the enemy is or does, and it is likely that it was scrapped early in development from the Art Nouveau version. It is also possible that this doll was just a stand-in for something else, or was placed there to give Elizabeth something to draw the player's attention to. And it does look pretty cool, but I can also see that it could have been a potential placement for maybe one of the turret machines that you see all throughout Columbia. Again, let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and opinions of all the cut content that I provided in the video so far. Now, the characters that I chose for the number 2 slot are rather fitting since I just did a video on Cornelius Slate. If you want to check it out, you can click the card at the top right hand corner of the screen, or wait till the video's over and it'll pop up on screen for you. I'd highly recommend checking out the story of Slate. Anyways, this is Slate's soldiers. Concept art originally showed additional unique outfits for Slate soldiers in 2 attractions at Hall of Heroes, the stereotypical Asian and Native American outfits. Some of Slate's soldiers were planned to have more Native American appearances, which would have been around the Hall of Heroes to fight Booker. Variations were only used for Slate's Crow in the final game. A unique Asian mask from one of the concept outfits did finally appear in Burial at Sea Episode 2, at Fontaine's secret panic room at the Manta Ray Lounge as one of his disguises. So who knows? Maybe Atlas had teleportation through terror at his disposal decided to go undercover as one of Slate's soldiers to get some information on Booker, or Elizabeth for that matter, and he just decided to bring that back as a souvenir. It's an interesting little theory, don't you think? But although it is highly, highly unlikely. Let me know what you think of that theory down in the comments. And finally, rounding out our list at number 1 would have been Suchong's lab assistant. Not you as Elizabeth, but an actual lab assistant that would have spoken to you, gave you tasks, etc. Unused subtitles indicate that a lab assistant, possibly named Harlan, was supposed to be heard and possibly seen inside Dr. Suchong's free clinic after Elizabeth arrives. The assistant is heard berating and beating a Big Daddy that had gone, quote, off the reservation to travel to Fontaine's department store and kill splicers. The idea for the drill was from this assistant, and he was very angry that the idea had been killed by Suchong because of the Big Daddy's actions. So I think that would have been a little interesting. It would have added more characters to Burial at Sea episode 2. And I would have liked to hear someone try to berate a Big Daddy or berate Suchong, because Suchong definitely deserves it. But I think the Big Daddy, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. For example, look at what happened at Dr. Suchong. All you need to know, he got his back fixed by getting a drill through it, so you tell me.